Hey, I've got a new book out. It's called Dollbloods. It's a nice piece of comedic fantasy, inspired by stuff like Terry Pratchett and Yancey Crowshaw's first novel, Mogworld. If you're looking for something new to read and feel like supporting a struggling indie, check it out. Links are in the description. And so another year has come and gone. For better or for worse, 2024 is finally over, and now we have the trials and tribulations of 2025 to deal with instead. Thanks a lot, Albo. To say 2024 was a good year for gaming would be like saying the 2000s only saw a couple of classics release. We had some genuinely fantastic releases, if not modern classics, remind everyone why this hobby is worth getting into, but also some outright pieces of shiz-no shit rightfully fail and fuel the acceleration of the death of some of the worst problems currently plaguing the industry. But this video isn't about Suicide Squad showcasing the weaknesses of the live service model, how Dustborn showed that in order to do political themes you can't aggressively beat the player over the head, and how Concord showcased many things like the problem of bloated budgets in the AAA space, the expectation of guaranteed success, and of course, ugly character designs. No, this video is about the kick-ass games of 2024. Titles that caught my eye and stood out either because of their quality, creativity, or just because I really liked them. This is about them, and I would like to stress that this is not a best-of list. While some of these I would call among my top picks for Game of the Year, these are just the games that stuck out to me the most over the course of 2024. Now let's get this started with the last game I planned to review for last year, Stalker 2. With how work had picked up at the time of release, I was barely able to put any time into this game for a review. So instead, it's getting a segment in this video based on the 9 hours and 46 minutes, according to GOG, I was able to put in before 2024 ended. So going off of that limited time, how would I best describe my experience with Stalker 2? Simply put, it's great! We play as Skiff, a Ukrainian military veteran whose home is destroyed by an anomaly from the zone. In order to make enough money to get a new house, he takes a freelance gig from a researcher and becomes a stalker. But things go wrong. A crucial piece of equipment is stolen, and now he has to brave not just hostile stalkers but also mutants and the alien nature of the zone in order to get it back. It's a simple premise that works, and if you're like me and you read the book that Stalker is inspired by, Roadside Picnic, then this premise makes the game feel more in spirit with its inspiration compared to the original games. A man doing an extraordinary job so he can do an ordinary thing. Buy a new house. Now if you've played any of the games in the original trilogy, Shadow of Chernobyl, Call of Pripyat, and Clear Sky, then you've already got a good idea for how this game is going to play. It's pretty much the same, but with a more refined UI and modern design principles. I will admit I was a little hesitant that some of what made the trilogy unique was going to be lost thanks to the inclusion of things like an overhead objective marker. Thankfully, additions like it tend out to be more cosmetic than anything else. It does point you to where you need to go, but you need to explore as you go there, both out of curiosity and to gather necessary resources, just like in the originals. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, but for those who didn't play those games, this is an open world shooter with a heavy emphasis on weakness in the face of something vast and incapable of hating you. Not because you're not a threat, rather because you're so insignificant that it recognizes ants before even glimpsing you. So if you don't explore, you'll be just as screwed as someone who explored and stumbled onto something they were ill-equipped for. The zone is dripping with an otherworldly atmosphere that's accentuated with Soviet-era depression that has you on edge from the moment the game starts. You go up against the kind of enemies you'd expect. Hostile stalkers that you won't know are friendly or not until it's too late, and slobbering mutants. But you also have to deal with environmental hazards. These include anomalies that you need to remain sharp to notice and with a bolt in hand to set them off safely, as well as more unique anomalies. Each of these ones have been handcrafted and feels like there's a history behind them, but the majority of the time, they're just there and you won't know how they're dangerous until you get close, adding a dangerous sense of uncertainty that makes exploring feel all the more rewarding than in something like, say, Skyrim, I dare say. There is also some solid sound design that helps feed into the atmosphere of the zone. There's a location with a windmill, and every time I went there, there'd be a roar that'd go off and I'd just be like, what the hell? is there a boss? I was on edge every time it happened, and it helped the game effectively be the experience it was meant to be, the opposite of a power fantasy. This is a disempowering experience where you have to strive and struggle for every scrap of progress you make, and the sound design is not only one of many ways that this is conveyed. On the gameplay side of things, there is a durability mechanic that also feeds into this, and it's applied to things like your guns. They degrade as you use them, and if you don't look after them with regular repairs and maintenance, they will become unreliable, getting clogged and making you into a mutant's chicken dinner instead of the feast of lead you planned. However, it also needs to be said that this is a very technically wonky game, with bugs and glitches galore, and for most other games, this would be another nail to hang from up on the cross. But for Stalker 2, this is actually to be expected. The original trilogy is famous for being one of the buggiest games ever made, and their bugs, while made the games as stable as toothpick scaffolding, if not unplayable in the case of Clear Sky, also added to the atmosphere and made them unique, immersive, and ironically, true to Roadside Picnic. Personally, I didn't see too many bugs myself. Most of the ones I saw was the zone becoming an uncanny, incomplete landscape that needed to pop into existence every time I loaded my save file. But on YouTube, you can easily find montages of things like enemies spawning out of nowhere, AI perceiving another reality, physics deciding we now live on Pluto, and the game deciding to add new unscripted anomalies to the map. The devs have been diligent about getting patches out to fix the outright game-breaking ones, and considering the environment this game was made in, technical wonkiness isn't just to be expected but forgiven, since it would have been hard to code a game when the power could go out at any moment because the Russians decided to bomb Kiev's primary vodka distillery. I loved the time I spent with Stalker 2, and wish I could have given it the full review it deserves. It's unforgiving, not for everyone, and some journos have definitely called it the Dark Souls of open world shooters. So you know it's good. But now we need to move on to a live service game that just so happens to be the best Vietnam War simulator on the market. Helldivers 2 is frickin' phenomenal. It's a live service title that respects its players' time, delivers a gameplay experience that's high octane and unique, all wrapped up in a patriotic, self-aware sense of humor that wears its 1997 Starship Troopers inspiration on its sleeve. I'm not even joking when I say it's the best Vietnam War simulator. Every mission you go on is a chaotic mess of orbital bombardments, friendly fire, and environmental hazards on top of ever-challenging hordes of enemies. Even if you don't manage to complete your objective, the map is still going to end up looking like the spiritual successor to Hiroshima. Despite this chaos, Helldivers 2 is a very co-op focused experience, thanks to the secondary objectives for each mission needing the full squad to effectively work together to complete, even if only passively, which will lead to some great organic moments of teamwork and in-the-field camaraderie. It also helps to encourage helping each other out as the upgrade resources are shared across the squad. So if one person finds one specific resource, everybody gets it in the end. And unlike Concord, Helldivers 2 can be called an example of a live service done well. The game has multiple battle passes, but they're all evergreen, so you're free to grab them at your leisure and work through them at your own pace. There's also a rotating retail shop and a premium currency, but there's two avenues to get the premium currency. Pay for it, or earn it through the battle passes, or by completing major objectives for Super Earth. For the latter, you don't even need to participate in, say, a defining battle. You just have to contribute to the build-up, so you can play just 1 or 2 missions, not play the game for 2 weeks, and then when you log back in, congratulations, you get a bunch of medals because you did your part. And that's never not awesome. Now on to the next game, which is a title that came out around the same time as Helldivers 2, and made Nintendo look so bad, they had to sue the developers. Palworld. This is the Pokemon game we didn't know we wanted until Pocket Pair put it in front of us. While yes, it feels like a natural evolution of Pokemon, at its core it has more in common with titles like Rust and Breath of the Wild. We explore an island, collect resources, craft items, buildings, and crafting stations to make the process more efficient. But what shakes it up is the POWs. Monsters we can catch and do everything from breed to put to work harvest, and even kill. And like Pokemon, there is a shit ton to catch, and you will want to catch them all. The game also does something a lot of survival crafting titles neglect to do. Give the player an immediate sense of direction. We're given a to-do list of objectives and research in order to progress toward the as of yet implemented endgame, and expand our bases with. Combat has the pals charge at each other with unique attacks and perks. Meanwhile, the player isn't passive. You can throw yourself into the mix, armed with melee weapons and guns, so you not only catch them all, but also hack and shoot them all as well. You can also craft equipment that lets you get involved on a level that Pokemon wishes it could. You can ride your pals. You can pick them up and use them as weapons. Give them guns. Doing this lets the player bond with the pals in a way that just isn't possible in Pokemon. Just as an example, the one time my Chillet lost a fight, I actually caught myself calling out in despair, "Chillet, no!" The game doesn't shy away from the darker aspects of its lore either. Instead, it revels in it for fun and for the believability of its world. You can catch and enslave other humans, for example. Granted, the catch rate for humans is always low, so it's a waste of resources and time, and the humans don't level up like the pals or learn new abilities and are only good for building, but like Corn's special corn powers, it's just cool to do.
Corn powers vitalize! Monkey, David, Fieldy, and Jonathan. Form of corn! All right, great job, gang!
However, Palworld is an early access title, so it's not done. But with what is already there, you could fool more than a few people to think otherwise. But as time goes on, aspects of the game could change one way or another, for better or for worse, and we've already seen one big one. Previously, in order to summon a Pal, you threw a Pal Sphere. Doing this let you strategically place it to get an advantage over your enemy. You cannot do this anymore. Now the Pal always spawns at your side. However, this change is more of a result of a lawsuit by Nintendo and a retarded patent they filed than a bad decision by Pocket Pair, but that doesn't mean it doesn't suck. For now, it's wait and see if the future updates are for better or for worse. Given Pocket Pair's track record, the former is more likely, barring more Nintendo shenanigans. At least the next game that piqued my interest was already done when it came out on Steam. The Entropy 02 mod. Possibly the closest we're going to get to episode 3 of Half-Life 2. The first Entropy Zero focused on a civil protection officer before the events of Half-Life 2, fighting against an insurgency to help the Combine retake Pillar 10. It felt rough and lacked a lot of the refinement Valve's games are known for, which meant the player could get stuck in some areas. But this sequel? Oh boy, it is a real hoot and a holler. Everything about this mod feels so much better than my brief time with the first one. The level design is better, they introduced new gameplay mechanics, and they even added new story beats that connect it to Portal. I'm roughly a third through 02, and not once did I get lost or wander into a dead end like I did in the first one. The new gameplay mechanics are things like kicks and squad commands, and it all fits in neat and tidy alongside the default gameplay, so it's not a hunt down the Freeman type situation. There's also some original enemies and hazards to deal with that feature their own unique AI, like resistance soldiers with jump packs, and these add a breath of fresh air for Half-Life veterans. The story too is quite engaging, if not generic in some areas. We're still the same Metro cop from the first mod, but now we've been given a promotion to Elite Overwatch Officer. In exchange for hunting Judith Mossman, we've been promised to be reunited with our long-lost daughter. But of course, there's more going on than our masters are telling us. Bad Cop is also an inoffensively generic protagonist. He's not silent like Gordon, and has a personality, but his name is a dead giveaway about the type of character he is. However, Entropy 02 wasn't the only Half-Life mod I played last year. There was another, more older and well-known mod that received its own standalone release, and let me tell ya, time has really been kind to it.
My guns! My eyes! Oh, Jesus! God damn it!
Nightmare House is back, baby! This mod was the first title by We Create Stuff, the guys behind In Sound Mind. It's a slice of action horror that combines both the original mod, its largest sequel, and later in a patch, The Lost Files. Now, unlike Entropy Zero 2, this mod didn't make any changes to the core gameplay. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But where it excels is in the smaller, more subtle stuff. The atmosphere in this mod is top tier. Original Fear quality, while the writing is quite solid with some decent voice acting too. The story feels like a mashup of Silent Hill and Resident Evil, with psychologically driven scripted scares broken up with bursts of balls-to-the-wall action. The fear factor is also enhanced by the auto-scare system, a kind of AI director that shakes things up in small ways to keep the player on their toes. Ensuring that while the broad strokes are the same, it's in the finer details that no two playthroughs will be the same. For their next game, We Create Stuff are remaking the original mod that only takes place in the house, and it'll be interesting if they keep this aspect of the mod for the new remake. Funnily enough, the next game that caught my interest actually shares one thing similar with Nightmare House, and that's that every run is different and no two are close to being the same.
Oh my god, we've got to get the hell out of here now. I know the way, follow me.
Witchfire. The new game from the boys behind The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, and some of the guys that worked on Painkiller and Bulletstorm. This is a fun, fast, and frantic roguelike shooter that also incorporates Souls-like elements. You'd think this would make for a frustrating experience, but no! Despite being in early access, it's well thought out and balanced. Every time you make a run in a zone, you don't lose everything right away when you die. There's crafting resources you hold on to regardless, and the Witchfire you collect, that acts as your XP. You give it a second chance to collect it from where you died. The maps stay the same, but enemy placement and boss layout changes on each run. The shooting feels good and packs a punch. We can take up to 3 guns into the runs, and there is a wide and varied arsenal to unlock, alongside 2 spells to give us an edge, and these can vary wildly in effect, like a bell that stuns enemies when it's rung with a bullet, or a cross that pulls enemies toward it. Speed is also a major factor, and what really sets it from the pack is just about every enemy attack has some kind of telegraph that the player learns to master the dodge move, mastering which makes you feel like a Christian demigod zipping between enemies before blasting them back to hell where they belong. Unlike the next game where instead of blasting enemies to death, you bonk them on the head with a stick until they turn to dust. Black Myth Wukong, a neat little mashup of Souls-like and boss rush that also takes inspiration from God of War. What really sets this apart was its acting as a sequel to the classical novel Journey to the West, and its showcasing of Chinese mythology and spiritualism, and it came with gameplay to match its originality, with a simple beat-em-up style of combat that fits the bill of easy to learn, hard to master, but gets extra depth from stances that change out your heavy attack, magic, transformations, and more. It never got old and was never not fun to bonk Yao Guai into dust. The gameplay occupies a sweet spot between consistent challenge and the skull-crushing difficulty of its inspirations. There was never a time where I became teeth-grindingly frustrated, but when a boss still gave me a tough time, it was just as rewarding to finally take that bastard down. It was also gorgeous to look at, with a smooth performance across both desktop and Steam Deck. The same can be said about a remake that everyone was expecting to fail. Despite everything being against it, Bloober Team knocked the Silent Hill 2 remake out of the park. They managed to preserve much of what made the original so memorable, while also adding in their own fantastic elements where preservation wasn't possible. The visuals and soundtrack are phenomenal and justify the upgrades I made to my desktop, helping create an atmosphere that envelops the player that leaves you scared, which is why I only played it with headphones once. With them on, it was just too much. The gameplay is definitely more action-heavy, taking inspiration from Callisto Protocol, but it's balanced so that every enemy encounter has the potential to be nerve-wracking, rather than an action-packed slog. It also took inspiration from other Silent Hill games, most notably Downpour, bringing back the open world element. The game is still linear, but you're rewarded with supplies and lore if you go out of your way to explore the town when you have the chance. The pizza scene with Eddie now happens in a movie theater, but you can still go to the bowling alley, and it's just as packed with detail as the places on your critical path. The love and attention to detail in this remake is just tremendous. But tremendous love doesn't always result in the best quality, something the recent release from Silent Hill's creator can attest to. I follow a philosophy of always supporting indies, be they authors like myself, developers, musicians, directors, and so on. That was one reason I checked out Slitterhead. To say this wasn't what I expected would be an understatement. It did disappoint me. I was expecting horror, and instead I got action, with some strong horror elements. This game takes obscene inspiration from the director's previous work, most notably Forbidden Siren, with gameplay mechanics and enemy design that makes me wonder if this started out as a design document for an unmade Forbidden Siren 3 on the PS2. But what makes Slitterhead stand out and made me want to give it a go is its most original idea: possession. The player can hop from NPC to NPC as disposable avatars, while named characters act as unique powerhouses. This mechanic adds a unique dimension to the admittedly rough combat, adding a layer of strategy that demands the player think on their feet regardless of the flow of the fight. It may be 20 years late, but it's great to see this PS2 title finally see the light of day, just like it's great to see a cult classic get its long overdue sequel. I did not know about this until I went to PAX last year. I played the demo, loved it, bought it upon release, and that was money well spent. 420 blaze it, baby. Normal Wholesome Games took a free novelty release about fighting Shrek to stop the Illuminati and turned it into a shooter with greater depth than it ever needed. The chaotic random sense of humour of the OG game is still here, but cranked to 11, and it never gets old. Thanks to each level having its own jokes that are either made through the gameplay itself or the environment, keeping things fresh so they just, well, as I said before, don't get old. Like needing to get rich so you pole dance to make it rain, and the game just spins you around a pole while enemies try to storm you.
Fuckface.
It also has a lot of replayability. Each level has special challenges for the player to complete. Doing this unlocks a unique weapon to take into any level, and this is very fair. The game tracks each challenge as they're completed, so you don't need to do them all in one go. My personal favourite is the Aussie gun, a semi-auto that swears at enemies as it's fired, and reloading or putting it away makes the player flip off enemies and swear at them. I'll let the footage speak for itself. Now here's hoping 2025 has just as many games that stand out like these did. Did you see all the honourable mentions I snuck in? Believe it or not, I'd actually shortened the list, or else this video would have taken even longer to make, and then I had to shorten it even more. Here are some not so hidden honourable mentions that also caught my attention last year. Outcast: A New Beginning. Essentially everything that Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora should have been, and a whole lot more. It feels just like one of the great games that came out back in the 2000s, but the only reason I didn't go in depth with it is because playing it makes my computer overheat, and I gotta open up an extra ventilation shaft to prevent it from getting damaged. A game so good that it actually hurts my computer. Greedfall 2, the sequel to Greedfall that's in early access, and honest to God, feels more like a true successor to Dragon Age than the recent Dragon Age game. Mouthwashing, a nice piece of narrative-driven horror that's full of creative twists and turns that I played on a train ride to Melbourne for PAX last year, and it made that just fly by instantly. Lollipop Chainsaw Repop, a remaster of a fun, silly game for fun, silly people that's only brought down by one problem. The soundtrack had to be removed due to licensing issues and replaced with an original one, which sucked, but at least it can be fixed on PC with mods. Shadows of the Damned Hella Remastered, a hidden gem of the 360 and PS3 era from the same creator as Lollipop Chainsaw. It still holds up with humour that regularly hits the mark, and the gameplay is just fantastic. No Rest for the Wicked, a nice little mashup of Dark Souls and Diablo by the creators of Ori and the Blind Forest with just as much emotional heart. Alone in the Dark, a fantastic return to form for the beloved horror pioneer that helped create the genre we know and love in the 3D space. Yes, it is brought down by some unfortunate wonkiness here and there, but it's a great return to the series' roots with an engaging story that can be seen across two different perspectives. Here's hoping we get to see a sequel. And that's finally done and dusted. Sorry this is so late, I've just been caught up with work, and working on my new book, a sequel to Dull Bloods, called Mouth of Winter. Anyway, if you're a first-time viewer, I hope I've earned your like and your subscription, and for the next game review, I'm planning to review the indie darling, Butcher's Creek. That actually caught my attention, and I've been having a lot of fun with it, and I'm also planning to review more indie stuff this year, but there's also some AA and some AAA stuff that's also caught my eye. And I'm still trying to get back into regular movie reviews. I've got some audio stuff that needs to be worked on. Yeah, I've got other stuff in the pipeline, and I hope you guys like the AI-generated music I've also thrown up. I'm playing around on Suno, and I'll be honest, I like doing that, it's a lot of fun. Anyway, I got all that more coming up, so please stick around.